Today I'm going to talk about how to answer the most commonly asked questions in job interviews with the Magnificent Seven, right? So it's NVIDIA, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, Tesla, Apple, and Amazon. It's going to be a list with pretty easy questions, and I'm also going to give you a couple of examples as we'll go through this list. So the most commonly asked questions in job interviews with these companies is, of course, your elevator pitch. Dan, will you please introduce yourself? I'm an effective senior program manager with over 20 years of experience delivering complex programs for both government and the private sector, with successful track record of delivering multiple programs heavily geared towards IT, cloud, and business transformation, from design to implementation to handover and revenue recognition. And of course, there are better ways you'd go with your elevator pitch. You could, for instance, structure it such as you start with a little bit of appetizer, with a little bit of introduction. You talk about your your side projects, your non-subject matter expertise, if I may call it so. Then you would gradually start into diving deeper a little bit in some examples, some highlights, some key highlights from your career. The level of depth would be something up to you to decide, and then you'll probably do a closing where you could also consider inviting for further conversation based on the key highlights from your career, right? If you wanted a template. Also, something I generally recommend people is to go from the least to the most interesting highlights from their career, because the idea is that the last impression, the last thing you talk about, could be the follow-up conversation. So you could follow through on that one, right? The second most commonly asked question here would be, why do you want to work for this company? Dan, thank you very much for taking time to interview with us, but why did you choose our company? Oh, why not? You are an exceptional company with some amazing people. You are the number one in the industry. I've always dreamed of working for a company like yours. So as you can see here, the most common mistake here is that people praise these companies over and over again, and that's it, right? So what you want to do here is to differentiate yourself from other candidates by finding some key reasons why you'd want to join them. Besides, they are famous, they are high growth companies, and you will eventually have a good salary there, right? So how does your expertise fit for what they're looking for? Or maybe you have some friends who recommended you for that role, and who think you think you'd make a great team with them. This could also work very well. But long story short, you should give this a good thought and find some non-standard reasons, some more peculiar reasons, if you want, why it makes sense to join them, and how could you add value to them to their business. Or if your CV allows, you could also say something online, hey, I don't know I want to work for you just yet. I'm just here to learn more about the opportunity, and so on. This is also an opportunity. This is also something that a small percentage of people can say in these job interviews. Number 3 most commonly asked question here could be a time when you had some beef with a colleague or with your boss, if you want. So a conflict, right? So conflict questions are pretty common in these interviews, because it's very easy to break teams with the wrong type of people. What you should understand about this about screening on interpersonal skills, and this will be a topic in some other questions as well, is that many people tend to put the blame on someone else, or many people try to come up with generic, vague examples taken from ChatGPT, if you want, simply because they're afraid to talk about these things. Now, I can tell you from experience, these experiences are never perfect, right? You just have to have a sense of commercialism in mind as well, and of course not to sound too arrogant with these things, right? So even if you don't get along with someone, for the purpose of reaching a common goal, you could get along with that person, reach that goal successfully, and even if you're not best friends, you still have a working relationship, right? This could be the classic example which cannot really hurt you. Of course, the extent this actually happened for your specific role. Also, what you should understand, it's a time when you had a conflict with someone, is a behavioral question, which basically means they're asking you for a past experience in order for them to predict your future performance on the job. But more interestingly, probably you've heard about this, you should answer this in the STAR format: situation, task, action, and result. Reason for structuring this is also because, if you're new to this, it will help you to improve your answers. But if you are not new to this, you should also know that STAR format is nothing more than a template which was invented by employers, like an API if you want, so they can screen people faster, right? So it's not only the fact that your answer will sound better, but if you give a wrong answer, the wrong answer in STAR format will become even more clear it's a wrong answer, right? So there are two sides of it. But long story short, STAR format as well, because it's a behavioral question. And we'll touch on this one on interpersonal skills as well as we move on. Number 4, what's your weakness? Public speaking. Okay, so this is the number one weakness that people give in job interviews. It won't disqualify you, but it won't make any significant difference either. What will make a significant difference is if you back that up with a great story. Okay, so the classic example for public speaking is that you are uncomfortable speaking in front of large crowds or unknown people, but you have no problem talking in front of a small audience of colleagues. This could be the classic examples of story to back that up. Now, with respect to your strength, this is actually more of a philosophical discussion, because in my experience, finding your true strength and your true differentiator going into a job interview could actually positively and significantly completely impact the way you answer questions around that interview. So this finding your strength exploration could go both ways, could both go internally for you as a candidate to find your true strength, but also what I know from experience, people tend to go into the job description and look for something interesting that they sell as a strength, right? Which I would not recommend, to be honest with you. I'd rather go with finding my true strength and trying to sell it, to package it in such a way that it makes the best possible sense for the job and company I'm applying for. And don't forget, as with the weakness, great story. So if you back it up with a great story, that's when you made the perfect combination, right? So this would be the number 4, strengths and weakness. Number 5, a time when you had to deal with an ambiguous situation, such as when you did not have enough data to make the right decision. And how did you go about this? And what was the outcome? Okay, so a time when you went through an ambiguous situation. If I may pitch something to you here, what's your best story that you are thinking to mention during your interview? Something memorable about you. And your best story, that's something memorable about you, will almost inevitably contain something ambiguous, some dealing with ambiguity and going through ambiguous situations. So that you could also go this way, right? Now, since this is such a broad topic, dealing with ambiguous situations, I would also mention a couple of standard ways you'd go about answering this question. Some keywords, if you want. You resolve ambiguity with data. For more executive roles, you could go with gut feeling if you want. You could also use a bit of delegation if you're for a manager level role, or you could go with prioritization, or even with education. So you educate yourself on something to cut through the ambiguity and eventually successfully resolve this challenge. But ambiguity is a big one in these job interviews, and you should ensure that you have some of the best stories will actually most likely fit into dealing with ambiguous situations. Again, this is a behavioral question, which means you should answer it in the STAR format as well, or as is recommendation. Number 6, how do you stay inspired and learn new things? So the classic mistake people do here all the time is that they say, hey, I have that one single source and that's everything I needed for the past 20 years to stay inspired with, to learn and stuff like that. So the key here is to say you learn from multiple sources. Right, so this is the most common mistake, and this is how to fix it. If you want to say like this, so I don't think this is a challenging question, so long you think a little bit what could be interesting for you to sell yourself on, and think about like this: the more peculiar the more memorable your answers are in these interviews, the better the chance of success. Okay, now memorable could also go both ways, but you know what I mean. Number 7, how do you prioritize tasks and manage your time effectively in a fast-paced environment? Right. So how do you perform with speed or in a fast-paced environment, maybe under pressure also if you want. Here, dealing with prioritization in a fast-paced environment, the number one challenge I see people having here is clarity of thought in their answers. So in other words, it's not hard to find an example of a time when you prioritize something, right, over something else in a work context. We do this daily. However, explaining that so it makes perfect sense in very few words can be challenging, because highlighting on exactly what was the key to prioritize there, that could be more interesting. So to give an example, if you'd want to prioritize meeting an urgent deadline into some web application, you could deal with the prioritization in such a way that maybe it's for internal audience, so the user interface doesn't require too much attention, because it's for internal audience, so you could prioritize only the functional stuff, right? And that would be the key to your prioritization. And of course, you could develop it, and you could go for 10 minutes straight if you want. But the point is that explaining how you prioritize with clarity can be challenging. Or another way you'd want to go about prioritizations is using frameworks, right? Type 1 or type 2 decisions from Jeff Bezos. Type 1 decisions you can take easily because they're reversible. They don't have much impact, right? When someone asks you, hey, can you quickly give me an idea of how long this assignment could take? Yes, sure, you could go in 5 minutes with that. Whereas if you have to decide a wisdom tooth extraction, it's impossible to get it back. Or maybe you could get an implant, but I've never heard of any such happening. So type 1, type 2 decisions, or there are many other frameworks to prioritize. And if you're applying, for instance, for a PM role, then prioritization framework should be your thing up to a certain point. So you should use these keywords, these frameworks, because if you introduce these frameworks in your answers, of course, they will become more credible, and therefore your answer is better, right? Now, this was number 7. Also interesting here, dealing with prioritization, is the backbone test. So in other words, if you say, hey, if you remember the example of the software, internal software with internal audience, where I prioritize because we were under a stressful deadline, we prioritize functionality versus graphical user interface. But one follow-up could be, okay, but what if they don't understand how to use the graphical user interface? And here a wrong answer would be, yeah, you're right, I haven't thought about that, right? So this would be, whereas the actual example would be, no, they know how to use it. We ensure that this is super clear because we actually designed that interface with our internal audience, so the functionality was priority and moved on, right? So notice is the backbone. So if you are convinced that that was the best way to go around that prioritization, you should also show it, irrespective of whatever follow-up questions might arrive, right? Backbone test is something you should also take into account here. Number 8, can you tell me about a challenging project where you worked on and how you overcome obstacles to achieve success? All right, so a challenging delivery. All right, so I just mentioned that example with the software, a challenge, right? Same as with ambiguity, challenge, ambiguity could also go hand in hand, right? So it's more of the same thing if you actually know how to read a little bit between the lines and understand why the question gets asked, right? Dealing with ambiguity could also be a matter of delivery, right? A challenging delivery, it's again definitely a matter of delivery. So long you understand these things, you could give eventually your best story, I said, because they're all challenging after all, right? And this is how you score best points here. Number 9, describe a time when you had to collaborate with a diverse team to achieve a common goal. Right, so how do you communicate as part of a team? This is the actual example that you're getting asked. With a diverse team, this could also be linked to diversity, equality, and inclusion goals. And the time you had to collaborate with the team to achieve a common goal basically means, tell me about a successful team project you've had. Okay, so it's as simple as that. And working in teams, you could have different roles. You could lead that team, or you could have a secondary role in that team. You could you basically have to highlight how you helped, how you drove that team's success, right? And you don't have to be the main actor of that team either. You just have to show how you contribute when working as part of your team. Now, if you remember in the beginning, I said questions around interpersonal skills will get asked during job interviews with any of these companies at least once. And you remember the mistakes. I said that it's quite easy to put the blame on someone else, even on other team members, for a challenge. For example, you say, because another team member did a stupid mistake, we all had to to go through a very difficult deadline, right? So, better way to say it, we had this challenge provoked by an error in whatever section of that project, and we had to overcome this challenge. How you overcome that challenge, that's the main story, not that who was responsible for that problem, right? And also remember the DEI goals, diversity, equality, and inclusion. It's about selling yourself as someone being able to bring a diverse group together and have a profitable outcome here, whatever profitable means for your role, right? It's different for a software engineer than for a director level role, but how you measure profitability here. Number 10, tell me about the time when you failed and what were your learnings from this experience. Okay, so the dumbest thing you could talk about here would be to talk about how you got fired from a last job because you did something wrong. Okay, so don't say this. I believe that's obvious. Now, this being said, the main reason why someone would ask you for a failure in a job interview would be for your learnings. I actually follow up on this one with what are your learnings, right? But furthermore, I can tell you from experience, this will, if I ask someone this question, I will have a clear picture on if they prepared for this interview. So if someone took the interview seriously, they would have prepared at least one failure story. To go even further here, it will take an average interview candidate with a high-performing company at least 3 attempts to find the proper failure story, right? So 3 attempts to find the proper failure story. So that's why it's a bit challenging, because, it's less comfortable to talk about failure than about success, right? Or I should say it's less comfortable to sell yourself from a failure story through the learnings as compared to talking about the key highlight from your career, right? But also maybe interesting for you to consider here would be that 50%, the second 50% of your answer should be the learnings. And you should really take those learnings seriously, because it does take time to find proper learnings from failures. Okay, this was number 10. Number 11, tell me about a complex project or initiative, or a time when you have to really dive deep into some complexities in a project. Okay, so as I just said, a deep dive. Okay, so a deep dive into your subject matter expertise is also something that's quite common in job interviews with these high-performing companies, simply because actually quite a few reasons for this, and this was one of Elon Musk's favorite screening methods when he was interviewing himself. Is when you make a deep dive with someone, you will quickly find out if they actually owned that specific project, right? And you will usually find it out if they can remember, or if they are comfortable talking to details. Okay, so basically candidates underestimate their ability to remember key details of some achievement which maybe happened a few years ago. And this is when you're getting a little bit under pressure to really find out, hey, how could I go around answering this? Because no one knows, no one wants to answer I don't know during a job interview unless it's really the case, right? So diving deep into something that's specific to your role is something you should expect in a job interview. It's also called the deep dive, the backbone test, if you remember, and now the deep dive as well. Okay, so number 12 here. How do you handle difficult feedback or criticism? Okay, so with the left hook, you know. So again, a question about your interpersonal skills, right? Also about interpersonal skills, but also, you know, basically knowing how to negotiate something. So you could simply go with an approach such as, yeah, you take a step back, you listen to the other side of the story, maybe you go back to the drawing table and you know, try to see, hey, what's going on here, maybe find some data to prove your point if you are right, or, you know, maybe find a solution in the case you are wrong, and then eventually have another conversation or conversations in order to have a successful outcome from this. But handling difficult feedback or criticism is something that most likely asks for the interpersonal skills, which, you know, again, I said, like, you could also sell yourself here on being able to get to the deep root cause of that conflict or criticism, and then come up with something to back your point, or to, you know, solve that, and also about communicating this with the other stakeholders, right? Number 13, a complex problem with a simple solution. Okay, so a time when you had a complex problem which had a simple solution. Now, this is basically asking for an invention, or a time when you showed inventivity, right? It's framed a little bit in a counterintuitive way, but it asks for your inventiveness. Okay, so whatever inventiveness means to your subject matter expertise, I believe this could also it's quite easy to find an example, so long you know what they're looking for. Number 14, how do you balance the needs of the customer with the needs of the business? Right, so here the main the key aspect you should keep in mind about these questions is about your customer focus, and many of these companies have embraced a customer first or customer centric approach in their business. This was pioneered by Amazon, but now also Microsoft and also Google to some extent have embraced this, and they actually use these customer-centric questions during their job interviews. Now, how do you balance the needs of the customer with the needs of the business? It's you know, if you go with a customer first approach, a customer always comes first, to the extent, you know, it also makes business sense. So for instance, you could give an example where the customer asks you some extra things, extra stuff, into which case your job would also be to ensure this makes sense to your business, at least in the long run, right? So if it wasn't profitable, if they asked you for something extra and you did it and it wasn't profitable for the next 1 month with that customer, maybe it was hugely profitable within the next 6 months because they asked you for they extended some major project or major assignment with these things. This could be the simplest possible example, but the idea is to show how you deal with customers and your commercialism as well. Commercialism is something that a keyword that makes sense for many roles. Number 15, tell me about a novel idea you had or decision you made that had a big impact on your business. What was novel about it? Right. So a time when you came up with some innovation for your business. And here from experience, you know, people who've been in small business will have no problem with these things. People who've worked in corporate roles all their career, then it would be slightly more challenging, right? For instance, I sell my services through YouTube using educational stuff, right? So I sell educational content by educating you about these job interviews. So I could easily pitch these things because I don't lack inventiveness as a small business. Okay, but this is why the question gets asked: a novel idea or decision which made a big impact on your business, right? And you also, of course, want to talk about some key metrics here, right? Like what percentage of this is your sales or whatever your subject matter expertise is. Number 16 here, tell me about the time when you decide to get something done, something which wasn't your area of responsibility, but definitely your company's best interest, right? So basically when you stepped in and get something done because you thought it was the right thing to do. Why would someone ask you this question in a job interview? Because they want to screen you on your ownership, right? So this is very common in Amazon interviews, but I find that the moment someone hears this question, they realize that, hey, I might have an example here, but also from experience, the second example they give tends to be even better. So now that you know the question, try to find out what would be the best time when you stepped in and get something done, even if it wasn't mandatory to do that thing. I don't know, for a software engineer, it could be you've done some feature amazingly well, 10 times better than it was expected to be. For a customer support role, I believe that's self-explanatory, and the list goes on. It's not a complex question, I find. Right? And number 17 here, give me an example of a cross-functional collaboration. Okay, so how do you collaborate with people from different departments? And throughout these list of questions, I said that there are many questions around interpersonal skills and basically working in teams if you want, right? So there's conflict and working in teams with screening on interpersonal skills. And as I said, with the question number 9, describe a time when you had to collaborate with a diverse team to achieve a common goal. You should be thinking about how do you make a difference, a time when you made a significant difference, or a time when you were helpful, in the case of junior roles, within a team context, right? Most teams these days are cross-functional, right? But a time when you really felt like you make a difference, a positive impact with respect to a team. Now, of course, for a more executive type of role will make more sense to talk about when they led a team to a success, right? So what was your greatest success leading a team? Could be maybe you convinced everyone to switch from web conferencing from Citrix to Zoom, for example. Could be you convince someone of something, because that's also something showcasing your interpersonal skills, right? But the moment you understand why the question gets asked, give me an example of cross-functional collaboration, the moment you understand it's about interpersonal skills, I believe that's the key to find the best possible answer, or the best possible story, I should say, about you selling yourself as someone being able to be a team player successfully and to collaborate with other colleagues efficiently. All right, so these were the 17 most commonly asked questions in the Magnificent 7 job interviews. I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.